2 million years ago, in the scorching heart of prehistoric Africa, the first human mothers faced an impossible challenge that would shape the destiny of our species. So here's what happened. While men pursued distant prey across endless savannas, women and children remained near temporary camps, their survival hanging on a daily question that meant everything: where is the water? Now, we need to talk about something remarkable. These early mothers became humanity's first scientists, though they carried no tools beyond sharp eyes and patient minds. Think about that for a moment. No GPS, no maps, no written records, just observation and memory standing between life and death. They noticed that certain birds flew in straight lines before dawn, always toward hidden springs. Watch the birds at sunrise, they learned, and you'll find water by midday. They discovered that elephants could smell water buried 6 feet beneath dry sand, and that following these giants during drought meant survival. The relationship was simple but profound. Where the elephants go, life continues. In the Rift Valley, where humanity literally took its first steps, a woman known only through her footprints at Lietali walked with her child 3.7 million years ago. We don't know her name. We'll never know her thoughts. But those fossilized footprints, preserved in volcanic ash, tell us she was likely searching for water, moving with purpose across a landscape that would kill anyone who didn't know its secrets. The greatest water finders developed mental maps spanning hundreds of miles. But these weren't simple maps of dots and lines. They memorized seasonal variations, water quality, and which sources attracted dangerous predators. A spring that flowed freely in the wet season might vanish to nothing during drought. A pool that seemed perfect might be the hunting ground of crocodiles. Knowledge meant survival, and ignorance meant death. During the brutal African dry seasons, when rivers vanished and lakes became nothing but cracked earth, waiting for rain that might never come, these women performed miracles of observation. They discovered that certain termite mounds contained moisture not much, but enough to keep a child alive another day. They learned that particular succulent plants stored drinkable liquid in their flesh, nature's water bottles scattered across the savanna. They found that morning dew collected most heavily on specific rock formations, those patient stones gathering tiny droplets that could fill a cupped palm. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. One drought, remembered not in any story but in our very genes, nearly ended humanity 70,000 years ago. Scientists call it a genetic bottleneck. Our population dropped to perhaps 2,000 individuals. 2,000 people. That's smaller than most American high schools. The entire future of humanity hanging by the thinnest thread. The women who found water during this catastrophe became the grandmothers of everyone alive today. Every single human being on Earth descended from those survivors. Their knowledge meant the difference between extinction and survival, passed from mother to daughter in hushed dawn conversations while checking dew levels, while reading the flight patterns of birds, while watching where the elephants walked. Think about what that knowledge transfer looked like. A grandmother, her hands weathered by decades of searching, showing her granddaughter how to read the land. See how the grass grows greener in that depression. Underground water. Notice the acacia tree standing alone on that hill? Its roots found something. Watch the ants at dusk, they move toward moisture. Generation after generation, the wisdom accumulated. Each woman adding her discoveries to the collective knowledge, each mother ensuring her children knew enough to survive. This wasn't casual information. This was sacred knowledge, literally the difference between life and death. A woman who knew 20 water sources was valuable. A woman who knew 50 was indispensable. An elder who knew 100, who could read the signs that predicted where new sources might appear after rare rains, who understood which water was safe and which caused illness, she held power that rivaled any hunter's strength. The sophistication of this knowledge still amazes modern researchers. These women understood hydrology without naming it. They grasped geology through pure observation. They became experts in animal behavior, plant biology, and meteorology, because their children's lives depended on it. When we talk about human intelligence, about what makes our species special, we need to remember these mothers who turned desperate necessity into systematic science. And here's something that should humble us. Many of their techniques work better than modern survival training. Put a contemporary human, even one with wilderness education, in the same environment without modern tools, and they'd struggle to match what these ancient women did routinely. The knowledge that kept humanity alive for millions of years didn't disappear because it was primitive. It disappeared because we stopped needing it, because we built cities and aqueducts and turned on faucets instead of reading the morning flight of birds. But the legacy remains. Every instinct we have about water, every time we feel drawn to a stream or ocean, every moment we find peace near flowing water, that's them. That's 2 million years of mothers who found water or died trying, who succeeded enough times that we exist to remember them. Their triumph was quiet. No monuments, no written records, no names carved in stone. Just life continuing. Just children surviving to have children of their own. Just the patient transfer of knowledge that meant everything. They were humanity's first teachers, and their classroom was the entire African continent, and their lesson plan was simple: find water or perish. We owe them everything. By 500,000 years before Christ, something extraordinary had happened. Water knowledge had evolved into humanity's first information network, controlled and transmitted by grandmother councils whose authority rivaled any hunter's strength. These weren't casual gatherings. These were power structures, governing bodies that controlled the most valuable resource on Earth. So here's how it worked. These matriarchs created elaborate oral traditions, encoding water locations in creation stories where goddesses wept rivers into existence or sacred animals dug springs with golden hooves. But these weren't just pretty stories told around fires. Each tale contained precise directions, hidden in plain sight within the narrative. Walk toward the sunset for half a day from the red cliff. Turn where the thorn trees grow in a circle. Listen for the underground stream beneath the white stones. The poetry was survival manual. The myth was map. A young woman hearing the story of how the Great Mother's tears created the sacred pool wasn't just learning religion, she was learning exactly how to find water when her life depended on it. The rhythm of walking songs helped measure distances, with each verse marking another hour's journey toward water. Sing the entire song of the antelope's journey, and you've walked exactly the distance from camp to the reliable spring. The beat of the song matched the pace of walking. The verses contained landmarks. Music became measurement, and memory became geography. Now we need to talk about something that shows just how sophisticated these early humans were. Women developed signaling systems, leaving messages for other bands through arranged stones, bent branches, and carved symbols. These preceded written language by hundreds of thousands of years. Think about that. We're talking about information storage and transmission long before anyone thought to scratch marks on clay. Tablets. A specific arrangement of 3 stones meant water found 2 valleys over. A branch bent in a particular direction and tied with grass indicated safe passage. Carved marks on trees, simple lines and circles conveyed complex messages about water quality, quantity, and seasonal reliability. This was humanity's first writing system, and it was all about water. At Kafse Cave in present-day Israel, 90,000 years ago, humans buried their dead with seashells and ochre near a sacred spring. The archaeological evidence suggests water sources had already become spiritual centers, places where the physical need for water merged with something deeper: reverence, ritual, meaning. The spring that kept you alive became holy. The grandmother who knew its location became priestess. The social power of water knowledge created the first female hierarchies. A grandmother who knew 50 water sources across the territory held more influence than younger women with mere strength. Age became valuable in a way it hadn't been before. The oldest women carried the most knowledge, remembered the most droughts, knew the most solutions. These water keepers negotiated alliances between bands, sharing information about new sources in exchange for food, protection, or marriage agreements. Imagine the conversations. 2 groups meet at a neutral territory. Tensions are high, resources are scarce. But the grandmothers talk. One knows of a spring the other group hasn't discovered. The other knows where certain food plants grow abundantly. They trade knowledge, forge agreements, arrange marriages that will bind the groups together. They understood something profound. Controlling water meant controlling life itself. This wasn't abstract philosophy, it was concrete reality. The woman who knew where water could be found in the dry season held power that no amount of physical strength could match. You could be the greatest hunter alive, but if you didn't know where to find water, you'd die of thirst with prey all around you. The daily ritual of water gathering became the heartbeat of social life. This wasn't just about filling containers and returning to camp. The hours women spent together, walking to distant sources and back, became the time when communities actually functioned, where women resolved conflicts, arranged marriages, and transmitted cultural values, where disputes were settled and alliances were formed, where jokes were shared and stories were told. The water source itself became the original community center. Multiple bands might use the same reliable spring, creating rules about access and use. Times were established: one group in the morning, another in the afternoon. Disputes were mediated by the elder women who had known the source longest. Systems of fairness emerged from necessity. Young girls underwent initiation ceremonies at sacred springs, learning not just locations but the moral codes governing water use. Never foul a source. Your waste today could be another family's death tomorrow. Always leave some for animals. We're not the only ones who need to drink. Share with strangers in need. Today you have water. Tomorrow you might be the stranger begging for mercy. These ethical frameworks, born from resource scarcity, became humanity's first laws, not written on stone tablets, not proclaimed by kings, but taught by grandmothers to granddaughters at springs that had sustained life for millennia. The rules were simple but absolute. Break them, and you might be exiled. Exile from the group that knew where water was meant death. The sophistication of this social structure still impresses anthropologists. These weren't simple survival groups. They were complex societies with hierarchies, rules, rituals, and consequences. They had specialists: the woman who knew plants, the woman who knew animals, the woman who knew weather patterns, and above them all, the woman who knew water. The grandmother councils made decisions that affected entire regions: where the band would move next season, which water sources could sustain growing populations, when to split into smaller groups because a territory couldn't support everyone. These weren't military decisions or hunting decisions. They were resource management decisions, and they were made by the women who understood resources best. Here's what gets me about this period. We're talking about a system that worked for hundreds of thousands of years. Not decades, not centuries, but hundreds of thousands of years. The Roman Empire lasted 500 years, and we still study it in awe. These water-based social structures persisted for 1,000 times longer. Success measured not in conquests or monuments, but in the simple fact that humanity survived, generation after generation, through ice ages and droughts and catastrophes we can barely imagine. The legacy of these grandmother councils echoes through every human culture. The respect for elders, the authority of matriarchs, the sacred nature of water, these aren't coincidences. Their memories encoded so deeply we've forgotten their memories at all. 40,000 years before Christ marked a revolution in water carrying and collection, though not a single manufactured tool was involved. Now, this might sound contradictory, a revolution without tools, but here's what happened. Women discovered that the natural world itself could be engineered, that nature had already created the technologies they needed if they just learned to recognize and use them. Women discovered that elephant ear plants, when properly folded, could hold a quart of water for hours. The massive leaves, with their natural waxy coating, became instant containers. You just needed to know the right folding technique, the precise way to create a sealed pocket that wouldn't leak. A woman walking back from a distant spring, carrying multiple folded leaves filled with water, was performing botany, geometry, and engineering all at once. They learned to waterproof gourds using pine resin and beeswax, creating vessels that lasted entire seasons. This wasn't simple. First, you had to find the right gourd, thick-walled, properly dried, without cracks. Then you needed to collect pine resin, which meant knowing which trees produced it and when. Beeswax required either trading with other groups or the dangerous work of harvesting from wild hives. The mixture had to be heated to the right temperature, applied in the right thickness. Too thin, and it would crack. Too thick, and it would never fully harden. In northern climates, they fashioned temporary containers from birch bark, sealed with heated tree sap that hardened into waterproof seams. The birch trees themselves seemed designed for this purpose, their bark peeling in perfect sheets. But knowing which season to harvest the bark, understanding that spring bark peeled more easily than winter bark, recognizing which trees would yield without dying, this was expertise earned over generations. The hollow bamboo stems of Asia became natural pipelines, allowing water transport from springs to camps hundreds of feet away. Imagine the first woman who looked at bamboo and saw not just a plant, but a delivery system. She understood that water flows downhill, that a hollow tube would channel that flow, that multiple segments could be connected. She created the world's first plumbing without metal, without modern materials, using only what grew around her. The most ingenious women created rain-catching systems using natural rock formations, directing runoff into natural basins lined with clay they discovered near riverbanks. They read the landscape like engineers, seeing how water wanted to move, where it naturally pooled, how slight modifications could capture and hold it. A few strategically placed rocks could redirect an entire stream. A clay-lined depression could store hundreds of gallons through the dry season. They built stone cairns that served triple purposes, marking water sources, creating condensation points for dew collection, and serving as ceremonial sites for water rituals. These weren't crude piles of rocks. They were designed structures. The stones were chosen for specific properties: dark rocks that absorbed heat, smooth rocks where dew would collect and run down into containers placed below, flat rocks that could serve as offerings platforms during ceremonies. During winters, they knew which ice formations contained the purest water and developed techniques for melting snow efficiently, using dark rocks heated by sunlight. This demonstrates an understanding of solar heating that wouldn't be formally described in scientific terms for tens of thousands of years. They knew that dark absorbs heat, that heat transfers to adjacent materials, that ice becomes water at specific temperatures. They knew it through observation and experimentation, through trial and error across countless winters. In deserts, they identified which cacti species held drinkable moisture and learned the precise technique for extracting liquid without poisoning themselves on toxic varieties. This was life or death knowledge. Many cacti contain alkaloids that cause vomiting, dehydration, and death. But some species were safe. Learning the difference meant studying subtle variations in spine patterns, flower colors, and growth formations. It meant someone, at some point, had tried the wrong cactus and either survived to warn others or died as a lesson. The knowledge of water quality became increasingly sophisticated. Women understood that running water was safer than stagnant pools, though they couldn't see the bacteria that made it so. They knew that water from certain rock springs never caused illness, while water from other sources, identical in appearance, made people sick. They discovered that some stones, we now know them as limestone and sandstone, naturally filtered water passing through them. They learned that leaving water in sunlight reduced stomach troubles. Modern science calls this solar disinfection. Ultraviolet light kills pathogens. But these ancient women didn't need to understand the mechanism. They observed the pattern. Sun-warmed water made fewer people sick, so they left water in sunlight. Empirical evidence creating practical solutions. Natural purification through sand and charcoal became standard practice. They discovered that water filtered through layers of sand came out clearer, tasted better, and caused fewer illnesses. That charcoal from specific woods improved water even more. They understood the process only through results, not microscopic theory, but the results were undeniable. The filtered water kept more people healthy. By 10,000 years before Christ, the last generation of pure hunter-gatherers had perfected water finding to an art form that modern survival experts still struggle to match. Put a Navy SEAL or a wilderness guide in the same environment, take away their modern knowledge of chemistry and physics, and they'd be starting from scratch. These ancient women had tens of thousands of years of accumulated wisdom, passed mother to daughter, refined by countless experiments, proven by the ultimate test survival. Here's what strikes me as remarkable. They did all this without understanding why it worked. They didn't know about bacteria or UV radiation or mineral filtration. They just knew that certain methods produced better results. They were scientists without laboratories, engineers without blueprints, doctors without medical theory. They were pragmatists who observed, experimented, remembered, and taught. The technologies they developed weren't primitive because they lacked metal or plastic. They were sophisticated because they worked with natural systems rather than against them. They enhanced what nature already provided instead of trying to dominate it. A folded leaf holding water isn't less advanced than a plastic bottle. It's differently advanced, requiring intimate knowledge of plant properties and geometric principles. Modern survivalists study these techniques with reverence, trying to relearn what humanity once knew instinctively. Wilderness schools teach leaf folding and natural containers as advanced skills, but for hundreds of thousands of years, every woman knew them. They were basic life skills, like reading or arithmetic today. You learned them in childhood or you didn't survive to adulthood. The tragedy is how much knowledge was lost when we stopped needing it. When we built permanent settlements around reliable water sources, when we created wells and aqueducts, when we turned on faucets, we lost the ability to find water in a landscape. We gained convenience and lost wisdom. Perhaps that's the price of civilization. But sometimes I wonder what else we lost that we don't even remember losing. The final millennia of the Stone Age witnessed water, knowledge transforming from survival skill to civilization's foundation. And here's where the story gets really interesting, where everything we've been talking about suddenly becomes the reason cities exist, the reason you're sitting wherever you are right now, the reason human civilization looks the way it does. Women who noticed seeds sprouting near their regular water-gathering spots began humanity's first experiments with agriculture around 12,000 years ago. Think about that moment. Some woman, walking the same path to the same spring she'd walked 1,000 times, noticed that seeds dropped near water grew into plants. Not a dramatic discovery, not a eureka moment, just patient observation leading to a quiet revolution that would change everything. The reliable water sources, where generations of women had gathered, became humanity's first permanent settlements. This wasn't coincidence. This was inevitability. For millions of years, humans had followed water, moving when sources dried up, returning when rains came. But what if you didn't have to move? What if you could stay at the water source and bring food to you instead of chasing it across the landscape? Jericho, one of Earth's oldest cities, rose around a spring that prehistoric women had visited for millions of years. The same spring, the archaeological evidence shows continuous human presence at that location, stretching back into prehistory. Generations upon generations of women walking to that spring, knowing it never failed, trusting it through droughts that killed lesser sources. And eventually, someone decided to stay. To build a permanent shelter, to plant seeds, to create what would become a city. The paths worn by countless generations of water seekers became humanity's first trade routes, connecting water source to water source in networks spanning continents. Every major trade route in the ancient world follows water. The Silk Road connected oases, Mediterranean shipping lanes, connected port cities built around natural harbours with fresh water. The paths weren't chosen by merchants or kings. They were already there, worn into the earth by millions of years of women walking to water. As the last ice age ended and the world warmed, rising sea levels and changing rainfall patterns challenged ancient knowledge systems. Springs that had flowed for thousands of years suddenly dried up. New sources appeared where none had been before. The climate was transforming faster than human memory could adapt. Knowledge passed down for hundreds of generations suddenly became obsolete. Yet women adapted, developing new techniques for finding water in transforming landscapes. They had to. Adaptation was survival. They learned to read new signs, to trust different indicators. They discovered that the old knowledge still worked if you understood the principles behind it, even when specific locations changed. Birds still flew toward water. Animals still knew where to dig. The details shifted, but the patterns remained. The transition to agriculture didn't eliminate water-finding skills, but transformed them. The same women who once found wild water sources became the first irrigation engineers, directing seasonal floods into crude channels that watered intentionally planted seeds. They understood water flow from years of observing how rain ran across landscapes. They knew soil types from digging for tubers and roots. They recognized which plants needed more water and which could survive with less. Their understanding of seasonal patterns, developed over millennia of observation, became the agricultural calendar. Plant when the rains come, harvest before the dry season, store water during abundance for times of scarcity. These weren't abstract concepts. They were survival strategies refined over geological timescales, now applied to a new way of living. The spiritual connection between women and water evolved into the river goddesses worshipped by every ancient civilization. The Ganges, the Nile, the Tigris, and Euphrates all bore female names, echoing ancestral memories of women as water's guardians. This wasn't metaphor. This was memory encoded in religion. The goddess who brings water was once the grandmother who knew where water could be found. Every mythology on earth includes stories of sacred springs, healing waters, and divine feminine forces associated with rivers and rain. The Greek nymphs, the Celtic water spirits, the Native American water protectors, they're all echoes of the same reality. For millions of years, women were the water protectors. The protectors became legends. The legends became goddesses. The goddesses are worshipped still. Modern humans still carry behavioral echoes of this ancient relationship. We instinctively know that bird activity increases near water. Watch people in unfamiliar wilderness, they'll follow bird sounds, hoping to find streams. They don't know why they do it. It's instinct, encoded by millions of years of survival. We know that certain plants indicate moisture. Willows mean water nearby. Cottonwoods require substantial groundwater. We recognize these patterns without conscious thought. We understand that morning dew can provide emergency hydration. In survival situations, people automatically look for dew on leaves, condensation on rocks. Nobody taught them this in school. It's deeper knowledge, genetic memory perhaps, the accumulated wisdom of ancestors who survived because they knew these things. These aren't learned behaviors but genetic memories, encoded by millions of years of survival. Now, scientists debate whether true genetic memory exists in humans the way it does in some animals. But whether it's encoded in genes or encoded in culture so deeply we can't distinguish it from instinct, the effect is the same. We know things about water we were never taught. Every city on Earth exists because ancient women found reliable water there. London on the Thames, Paris on the Seine, Cairo on the Nile, Baghdad on the Tigris, Beijing near multiple river systems. Every single permanent human settlement began because water was there, and someone, almost certainly women, given millions of years of precedent, recognized it as reliable. The locations of modern civilization were chosen in prehistory by people who never imagined cities would grow there. They just knew water was good, consistent, sufficient. They stayed. Others joined them. Generations passed. Settlements became villages. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. But the original decision, the founding choice, was made by women evaluating water sources using knowledge older than language. Every cup we raise contains the legacy of mothers who kept their children alive with nothing but observation, memory, and courage. Think about that next time you drink water. The casual act of hydration connects you to an unbroken chain of human survival, stretching back 2 million years. Every drop you drink was made possible by women who found water in impossible circumstances. Their greatest tool was patience. Not the passive patience of waiting, but the active patience of observation. Hours spent watching birds, days spent following animal trails, years spent learning seasonal patterns, lifetimes spent accumulating knowledge, generations spent refining it. Their technology was attention, the ability to notice small details that others missed, the discipline to remember those details across decades, the wisdom to recognize patterns in seemingly random events, the courage to trust those patterns when lives depended on being right, and their triumph was our existence. Every human alive today descends from women who were good enough at finding water to keep their children alive. The ones who weren't good enough left no descendants. Natural selection at its most fundamental. The best water finders became everyone's grandmothers. We don't remember their names. We never will. They left no written records, no monuments, no lasting works we can point to and say, this is what they built. But we exist. That's their monument. 7 billion people living on every continent, speaking thousands of languages, building civilizations that would seem like magic to our ancestors. We're all here because women found water. In the end, that's the story. Not kings and conquests, not inventions and innovations, just mothers keeping children alive, one day at a time, for 2 million years, finding water, sharing knowledge, teaching daughters, surviving. Their legacy flows in every river, pools in every lake, falls in every rain. And it flows in us, carried in memories deeper than thought, in instincts older than words, in the simple truth that life follows water, and water was found by women who refused to let their children die of thirst. That's how civilization began, not with a bang, but with a grandmother showing a girl where to find water when the rains fail. That moment, repeated millions of times across geological ages, created everything we are. We owe them everything, and the least we can do is remember.